Welcome back to Vermont Viewpoint. I'm Rick Singari. One of my favorite buildings in Vermont is right here in Randolph. It's not particularly glamorous, but hard by the railroad tracks is the Randolph Coal and Ice Company. It's an old shed. It oozes the history of a bygone era, and the idea of coal and ice, one heats, the other cools, one's dirty, the other pure, has always intrigued me. Now to meet another intriguing member of the Randolph community, we've got the owner of Fars Hill and Rain or Shine Tent and Events Company, Perry Armstrong. Perry, welcome to Vermont Viewpoint.
Hey, welcome. Thank you very much for having me. It's great.
And we're also going to be discussing the Randolph Winterfest. Listeners, if you've got a question for Perry, you want to share some Randolph fun facts, you can give us a call at 802-244-1777, 877-291-8255. Perry, is there any idea why every person I asked about who should be on this show, Perry Armstrong was on their list?
I have no idea. I'm pretty well known. You know, I'm a local character. There's no doubt about it. A lot of family background. You know, my family's, I think I'm 7th, 8th generation in the community. My uncles still run the family farm that I think they acquired back in the late 1800s. So I guess that's part of it. Yeah. And I'm also kind of vocal.
Okay. You got to be well liked.
I think so. Most everybody, I guess. I'm not sure. There may be a few that don't quite agree with what I do, but that's okay.
Well, maybe we'll sway them this morning.
Who knows?
Yeah. Can you give us a history of Fars Hill?
So Fars Hill was the Randolph Community Ski Area from like 1936 to 1966. It was operated by a gentleman by the name of Harold Farr. He and his wife lived on the farm, and so he, I don't know what what made him think about this. I know somebody said he was friends with a gentleman over in Woodstock who built the rope tow over there,
right? And
so he decided, I guess, to put together the ski hill. And so, he built a rope tow, operated it, I guess, with numerous different items. But the one I've known the most about was I think it was a Ferguson tractor, and probably in the 50s. So I hear people telling about the tractor. It had more power, so pulled the skiers up the hill faster. I've heard some of those stories before. Mm-hmm. So he operated that at no charge to the community members. I guess there was a fee if you wanted to get lessons from a gentleman in Royalton who came up and taught some ski lessons. In 1966, a group of investors had purchased the property outside of town and created Pinnacle skiways. And so Pinnacle, actually, they dedicated their practice slope to Mr. Farr. And so he ceased operations up there at the hill. So it sat there, kind of dormant. It was always used for sledding. A lot of people, take their kids up there. Reservoir Road goes right by it. So you could take the kids to the top of the car and drop them off, and they could sled down the hill. So 2019 or 2018, my wife and I were made aware that the property was for sale. And so I immediately, was like, got to have that. It was one of the largest pieces of land left in the village district. So consequently, it could have become houses. And, you could have put a lot of houses there, but, I saw more value in that. I think that the value here is to try to get it back into the community ski hill. And I never realized how big a deal that was until last year. I bought a T-bar from Oak Mountain over in New York, and it was blasted all over Facebook that they were losing their T-bar, but it was going to another home. And next thing I know, 2 days later, I'm getting phone calls from people, in the ski industry going, "Hey, what are you doing?" That's kind of a unique thing to, start a ski hill.
Yeah. And
so I, told them what was happening, and so, they're very excited about it. And so they're following up with me as soon as we do get it operational. A couple of these guys wanted to come out and do a story and, talk about the history of the hill. So
will there be Fars Hill Ski Hill again?
I believe so.
Wow.
Right now we have the equipment. I was able to secure the T-bar from Oak Mountain, and within the same day that I got that phone call, I also found 2 handle tows over at Loon Mountain. And so, these things kind of happen, I guess, for a reason.
Yeah.
But I've been working with Mike Nellis, and he's the tram inspector, and he was how to look out. I have a couple snow guns I bought from a gentleman by the name of Aaron Madison from Techno Helpin'. And so these guys were all kind of out there, and they're in the industry. And honest to God, within 24 hours, I had those tows secured.
Holy mackerel.
Kind of cool.
Did you do much skiing at
Oh,
Fars
yeah.
Hill
Actually,
back
I
in the day?
skied at Pinnacle when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I never skied at Fars Hill. I had sledded down Fars Hill, but we never skied on that hill. I have now. Sam and I, it was just on here a few minutes ago. We bought a portable rope tow here a couple of years ago, and we went up and ran that all day. So now can say I've actually skied on Forest Hill. But the plan is right now we just need a little bit more work, but we're working with the town and trying to get an easement put together so that we can locate the top of the T-bar on the town's recreational property because they own above us. And I believe we're going to be successful at that. And as soon as I know that that's underway, the engineers are ready to lay out the lift line and get that built. So I'm hoping by next fall we have that operational.
Oh, Perry, that's really exciting.
Really cool.
Yeah. Now, in between now and then, whenever that happens, you do have an event coming up in a few weeks that people are pretty excited
Yeah.
about.
So we're one of the things that had been talked about in the community when we were going through kind of a restructuring of the community here a few years back. We did this thing called the R3 project, which we were helped out with by John Copens and Paul Costello. And so in that conversation that the community was involved in, there was this conversation about, we ought to have some more events. And so there was one lady who's threw out this remark about, well, we should, have a winter carnival. Her name is Sally Penrod. And so, there's some conversation about that, and it immediately hit me that, well, now I own the hill. Maybe we could do this. Yeah. And so, at the time, I had purchased a snowcat because I'm kind of like those kind of toys. So we decided, I got a bunch of guys together and a bunch of gals, and we just said, okay, let's see if we could pull this off. And so we did the first one in 2019. We ended up with about 1,000 people, and it's a free community event. A lot of sponsorship from local businesses. In the second year, we doubled that number to 2,200. And I don't know what we're going to get this year. I think it could be big because we're, the Facebook post that I put on in December was, I think, shared 400 times and viewed by 10,000 people. Wow. so I don't know what to expect. I do have a pretty big following at Forest Hill. I also have a following on my personal page, and then Rain or Shine has a page. So, I share it on all those pages, so that's probably why I get so many views. Yeah. But, so this year's event is going to be a little different than the last 2 years. We've got some surprises that we're working on, and so I'm not going to share those. Sam asked me not to tell anybody what we were doing. But we've got some.
I won't use my paid professional muscle here to make you tell us.
It's all good.
We'll save it.
These ideas that were, they happen, kind of organic. I mean, the first year, for example, we have these great big beach balls. And I originally bought them, and I built the track, so thinking that people would race around the track. With the beach balls. The idea was, maybe we'll get teams and they could do a relay or something. Well, the beach balls never got to the track. Literally, the little kids showed up and they just took all the beach balls out of the corral and they started pushing them around the hill. So that was pretty cool. And then if you look at all the pictures, you'll see that there's kids pushing these beach balls everywhere. So I thought that was something different, but anyways, it turned out I bought another 25 beach balls, and in the second year, the beach balls, they all were moving. There wasn't an idle beach ball for 4.5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so the kids just love pushing them around. They're colorful, and they try to climb on them.
Yeah.
So along with that, there's we have a tubing hill, so there's there's free tubing. We've had antique snowmobiles in the past, so if anybody out there hears me, I would love to have your antique snowmobile. You can bring that to the event. All you need to do is reach out to me on my Facebook page or text me, and we'll certainly make room for you. There's also some food vendors coming. We have that. There's horse-drawn carriage rides. And then, let's see, we've got snow sculpture that we tried the first time around, and, the kids were climbing on the hills that those people were trying to carve, so I think I've solved that problem this time, but you're going to have to come see what I did. Right. Or follow us on Facebook.
That's right.
Okay, because I will post pictures of what we're doing. So. Okay.
Hey, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to ask you to stick around.
Okay.
We have had, it seems, one of our guests oversleep or maybe forget to show up here at Ken's this morning. But now I know why you have been suggested by everyone to be the special guest here this morning. So don't go away. Perry Armstrong is with me. We're going to learn more about Forest Hill. We're going to learn more about the Winterfest. As a matter of fact, don't you have a Winterfest ski cap on? Look at this.
These will be for sale.
Nicely done. They're beautiful. Look good. good on
They
you.
come in 4 colors.
All right. He's got the really vibrant red. Looks great on him. We'll also learn about Rain or Shine tent and events after this break. This is Vermont Viewpoint on WDEV. We're back on Vermont Viewpoint, and we're back in Ken's Barbershop in downtown Randolph. I'm with Perry Armstrong. He's the owner of Rain or Shine Tent and Events, Fars Hill, and also big backer, coordinator of the Randolph Winterfest. We were talking about what's going to be going on at Winterfest. First of all, let's give people the date and time.
Oh yeah, so the date's February 26th. The event starts at 1 o'clock. So there's a cardboard box race that people are involved in. I forgot to mention that earlier. Froggy 100.9 and the Frank station are promoting that. They're the sponsor of that event. We did it first in 2020, had 50 some odd entrants. I wouldn't be shocked if we get 100 this time around. So there's 3 age groups, and it's based on creativity and also on speed. That's if you get to the bottom.
That's right. It has to make it all the way down.
It's got to get to the bottom. You got to get there. Yeah.
How long is the hill?
So the hill's probably 250 feet long at that point, and it's pretty steep. So, you got to stay straight.
People get pretty creative with their boxes.
Oh gosh, yes. Go to the Facebook page or, go to the Winterfest website. It's randolphwinterfest.com. And you'll be able to see there's some photos there of the cardboard box races, and they're very creative, and a lot of energy goes into those.
Oh, that's great. Are you looking for volunteers to help out?
Yes. So right now, you can also register. We're needing volunteers to help with the event. Running the tubing hill is one of them. That takes a fairly large number of volunteers because we try to have a person overseeing each lane. I think there'll be 4 or 5 lanes this year. So, we need staff to top and bottom just to make sure everybody gets down safely. Mm-hmm. So. And
you talked about registering.
Yes.
To come out, people can just show up that day? But
they can. It's going to be a little faster and a little easier if you pre-register.
Uh-huh.
So if you pre-register, the plan will be when you get to the parking area, we're hoping that there'll be a table there. You'll go check in, and then you just hop on the bus. It'll take you up to the hill. Mm-hmm. So that's the hope. We'll see. It takes another couple volunteers to run each parking lot. So
yeah.
It's going to depend on my volunteer pool.
How many volunteers do you think you need right now?
Well, I think, 45 to 50 is going to be a good number.
Yeah.
So years past, we used to do a bike festival here in town. And, we always had a great group of people volunteering for that. And as that event grew, we went from needing, 40, 50 volunteers to 100.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And I think they have to have like Thursday or Friday evening available to come out for a little bit of a training session.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, we're going to run little sessions on Thursday and Friday night just to kind of go over what we're doing and try to figure out hey, what would you like to do? What's your interest? Do you want to we have to have some volunteers to do different things, obviously. So try to pick things that people like, and they get to spend a couple hours volunteering, the hope is, and then they can, go enjoy the event.
All right. Before we move off Fars Hill, before we move off the Winterfest, anything else we need to talk about? We got the future plans, we got the history, the fest, anything else?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Good.
I think we're good. I think you've got it.
All right. Now let's talk about your business, which is Rain or Shine Tent and Events. So how long have you been in this business?
So I've been involved in this since 1987, and I took a little 4-year break, sold the company, took the company back in 2004. So it's been a great business for us. We provide an awful lot of services to people around the state. Primarily, we're wedding and corporate work. We do some institutional stuff. Graduation season, we're always busy. So that's pretty much what the company's been doing. Over the pandemic really knocked their wind out of our sails. I mean, I will say that's been a struggle. And now we're kind of faced with a labor shortage, which I think everybody is. Yeah. And so we're trying to figure out how to overcome that. We're doing more mechanized things and trying to bring in pieces of equipment that can actually help on the labor side of things. So So that's the struggle with that. But, it's a great business. I love it. It's what enables me to do these other things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, what got you into tents and events in the first place?
Oh, golly.
It's not necessarily, I mean, it's a needed business. It's a great business, but it's not something that somebody thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to, get into the tent business.
Well, right. And so a lot of what we do now didn't exist back in the 80s. I mean,
Right.
We're doing events now that, literally, the rental numbers would stagger you as to what people are paying and what they're doing. So we're doing events now, honestly, that, we're building large deck structures, and actually there's one at Farrs Hill that we put up for this tent. So this is a clear span tent with a deck underneath it, totally off the ground. And so that's something we've been doing for the last few years. But the whole industry evolved from the 80s up until this point, going from what used to be a backyard party with, a colored tent and a bunch of brown metal folding chairs, right, to now, people have seen what's out there. I mean, there's, white tents, gorgeous. I mean, farm tables, building complete restaurants in the middle of a field.
Yeah.
So that's how the business has evolved. What got me into it was a kind of a part-time thing. There was a gentleman here by the name of Bill Dupress, who was an auctioneer, and he had some tents that he'd purchased from a company in Northampton, Mass. And he had a son. His name was Pember Dupress, and so Pember was too young to drive the truck, but Pember knew how to set tents up. So Bill had taught him to do that. So Bill would hire a number of us local guys, whoever was available, to go out and put up the tents with Pember. And so, we did that a handful of times, and then Pember got to the point where he graduating high school and wanted nothing to do with tents again. Bill didn't want to do anything with the tents. So I bought the junky old tents and the brown metal chairs. And from that point on, it was obvious, within the first year that I didn't have anything that people were calling about wedding tents. We didn't have anything, so we bought a white tent. And from there, it's led to, what we are now.
Yeah. Well, talk about, I went to the website and I was blown away. When you think of these big, beautiful white tents, that you have been to events for, you think of the big center poles, etc. You had these clear span. That's
yes.
So explain what that is to someone who's never been at an event in a clear span tent.
Okay, so let's get back to the basics. Okay, so there's pole tents or pole canopies. Those all have single center poles, drive stakes. They're all held up with rope and tensioning. They have frame tents, which are basically aluminum pipe structures, do the same thing, and they eliminate the center pole in lots of sizes. But once you get up to 50, 60 feet wide, you've got to be looking at a different kind of structure. So a number of years ago, I actually went to work for a company. One winter, I was a little bored, went to Florida, 1991. There was a company that had just recently brought these things in from Europe, so I said, well, this is kind of cool. I think I'll go to Florida for the winter. Leave the wife and kids. Go put up some tents, right? So I learned how to put up clear spans. I thought these things were the most amazing thing. It's like, this is awesome. So I said, we're gonna do that in Vermont. Well, it took 30 years to get to the point where people would accept those products, because New England has been a pole tent area. And so that's what everybody was used to. So it took a while to break that into the market. In 2006, I think, I bought, my first 2 clear spans, and we started promoting them. And, we had a few rentals here, a few rentals there, but now it's a primary part of the line. I mean, it's the most significant part.
Once you attend an event or see a picture of it and you understand it, it's absolutely stunning.
And the structure it's more durable. You're not going to worry so much about wind and situations like that. The wind rating on those clear spans is, I think 115 miles an hour, 20-second gust or something like this. So they're more stable. And, not that I'm a fan of all these different structures, because they all have their place. But for a lot of clients that want that security, that their event's not going to, be blown away, if they have a big windstorm or something, these are certainly the product.
I want to ask you about one more thing that I saw on your website, and it involves clear. What in the world are these clear topped frame tents?
Okay, so the clear span tents, okay, that means that there's no center poles in the structure. Those tents are built in a manner where you can actually, they're components that can be expanded. So you can literally start out with we have with 15 meter, okay, which is basically a 50 wide. it comes with at that point, it goes with a 5-meter bay. So that 5-meter bay you can literally keep adding 5-meter bays. The options that are available to you now are clear sidewalls, solid sidewalls, windowed sidewalls. Well, then what came about was you can actually put clear tops in these now. So the only problem with clear tops is clear tops are great in the spring, they're great in the fall, but they're not good in the middle of July because it's a greenhouse. Right. So we've now devised a system where we actually can now cover the top with another white cover so that everybody can work in the tent, and then the afternoon of the event, most weddings take place 4:30, 5 o'clock, we go pull off that clear cover really quickly, and then the clear cover is exposed, and so that's what they've got for the evening.
Yeah, at night you have the stars lighting up, clear, beautiful picture of the night sky.
They're gorgeous. I mean, I dread it when somebody says, "Oh, I want one in July," but it's like, okay, you're the client.
Necessity, the mother of invention. You figured it out how to.
Yeah, well, the cover thing helps a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Perry Armstrong is the owner of Rain or Shine Tent and Events Company, Fars Hill, which is the site of the Randolph Winterfest. To learn more about that, go to randolphwinterfest.com. We're going to take a break for the top of the hour news, get a CBS News update, then come back to Ken's Barbershop in Randolph and meet Marjorie Ryerson. And a reminder that coming up today at 1 o'clock, we've got 3 full hours of The Getaway with Greg Hooker. This is Vermont Viewpoint on WDEV. Back on Vermont Viewpoint, live from Ken's Barbershop in Randolph, and my next guest has a very interesting resume.
I made 2-page list, and look at that.
We're on live, Marjorie. We're on live right now. All right, that's Marjorie Ryerson. Has a very interesting resume. She's been a photojournalist, author, professor, and state representative. And are you hearing me now?
Thank you.
Okay,
That's
there we
better.
go. All right, Marjorie Ryerson, thank you so much for coming down and being here at the shop this morning.
Rick, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
All right, listeners, if you'd like to join the conversation, you can give us a call, 802-244-1777, 877-291-8255. Marjorie, you were a photojournalist, so did you always have that interest in photography and have photojournalism as a career goal?
I didn't have photojournalism as a career goal, but I started taking photographs at age 11 because my father was a photographer also, and he taught me how to run a darkroom, and I was hooked. And I borrowed cameras from people through college, and I finally earned enough money to buy myself a Nikon, and it went from there. It just grew from there.
What was it that really kind of hooked you to pursue photography?
I loved working in the darkroom. And I was a professor at Castleton State College for many years, and I was there to teach journalism, but I offered one photography class a year, and I hadn't been hired to teach photography, but they had no one doing it for journalism students. And when I would have a student come in to class the next day and say, "Oh my God, I was in the darkroom last night and I couldn't leave. I was up until 6 a.m. because I just couldn't stop developing prints." And I thought, that's what happened to me. It was the sign of a photographer when they got totally hooked on the process of creating an image and shading it in places and building up the light in another place. And when I would have a student that was hooked like that, I went, yep, another photographer.
Interesting. Most of us never had that experience. I mean, back in the day, we would just send our rolls off to be developed or drop them off.
Right.
Now we take a photo, we've got it right on our phone or a digital camera immediately. So we never had that experience. So that's a really interesting perspective.
Well, it's interesting, Rick, because I found once the photography world moved to digital, I lost interest. It was the work in the darkroom that was thrilling.
Well, do you remember any specific events that you photographed that were particularly special? Getting you out of the dark room for a moment.
Yes, I do. And in teaching that photography class at Castleton State College, I would go with the student, I would get them out of the concrete block classrooms, and we would go on field trips all the time, and they would be doing the assignment because they were the students, and I didn't have to do the assignment. I was the professor. So I just photographed things that interested me, and what that led into, I discovered that I was photographing a lot of water, and it led into a global project that, first was a book. I published a book called, or the University of Michigan Press published it, Water Music, and it took a lot of work to even find a publisher because, they were saying, well, who's ever heard of you? And
We have.
several publishers said, we lose money on Ansel Adams. We can't publish a book by an unknown photographer who's just photographed for Vermont Life. And I went to a publisher in Boston, and David Godine, and he said, you have to have a famous person write something. And I thought, water belongs to the whole planet, so who does the whole world know? The Dalai Lama and the Pope. That doesn't work, and so I was teaching a feature writing class one day, and all of a sudden I froze, and I said, music and water share the same qualities. And the students said, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, I'm sorry. And I went after class running to the music department and said, I'm going to invite world famous musicians to write about water for my photography book. And the head of the music department said, you're a crazy woman. And it took 5 years of, and I brought Vladimir Ashkenazy and Emmanuel Axe and Randy Newman and Pete Seeger and 66 leading musicians on board, but it took 5 years. And I worked through the Chicago Symphony and all these other places. But, this is a long route around to answer your question. I was then going out, I was saying, what pieces of water have I not captured? And so for one of the great adventures in my life, I flew to Nashville, rented a car, and started asking motorcyclists on the road, where should I go to photograph the Mississippi River? And they all gave me directions, and I went the full length of the Mississippi River down, trying to get near the river, but it's got floodplain all over. And I finally rented a canoe and went down on the river, swimming in the water in July, camping on islands. It was extraordinary.
Oh, Marjorie, that was the book Water Music. Who is it? Is it Handel or?
That's right.
Handel, the Water Music is their symphony?
Right.
Yep. All right, so you also taught at Castleton State, but I want to we only have a few minutes left. I want to talk about politics. In 2013, you were appointed to finish the term of the late Larry Townsend. Had you been involved in politics before?
I had served as a town selectman for many years.
Yeah.
But so it was a shock when the governor called me one day and said, Marjorie, it's you I want in the legislature. I was like, oh, okay. I was not prepared for that, and it was fascinating work.
Yeah, tell us about what that must have been like, especially that first term, because you joined, in the second year of the biennium,
that's
right?
That's right.
And so everybody was up to speed, but not
And
Marjorie
I was the
Ryerson.
only new representative in the
Right.
whole House, so there was no introduction, there was no orientation, there was nothing. And, people would say, sign this petition, and I'd say, well, could you tell me where the ladies' room is? I mean, I was totally lost initially, but the other legislators were fabulous, and they served as my teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Shep Smith, who was the Speaker of the House, and said, I want to be on the Natural Resources Committee. That's what matters to my heart. And he said, it's already a full committee. He rearranged people so I could serve on that committee. And it was extraordinary work, being side by side with people who were dedicated to protect our state.
Yeah, and you got to then serve a couple more terms, ran twice, right? And so you must have enjoyed that
I
year,
loved it.
even when
I
you
loved
were
it.
confused by where the ladies' room
Oh,
was.
I loved it.
Yeah, and let's talk about the area that you represented. So what is it about Randolph and the surrounding communities that make it so special?
Randolph, the lead thing on my list of many items here about what's valuable.
I should tell people that they can't see. So Marjorie has written a 2-page report on what's special about Randolph, but you have 2.5 minutes to tell people.
Central to holding this town together is the Herald of Randolph, a top-notch weekly newspaper which was first brought into existence in 1874 and which has been the lifeblood of information about the town, its citizens, its government, its joys and challenges ever since. It is a superbly written, edited, and photographed paper based in downtown Randolph. I worked for it for 4 years. It was my first journalism job in the 80s. And it provides news, information, and insight into communities around Randolph, too. It's an extraordinary unifying element of this town. But Randolph also has a great library, a hospital, 2 thrift stores, 2 auto parts stores, 2 drug stores, 2 laundromats, an indoor gym, a fully staffed fire station, police protection, a senior center, a great hardware store called Central Supplies, a food shelf, child care services, elementary school, high school, tech center.
What does that mean?
It's extraordinary to
what does
live
that
here.
mean to people who live in a community that have the things you just mentioned?
Well, more important than all of those assets for meeting our needs is the fact that this town is very stable. People move here and they never leave.
Yeah.
All my neighbors have been the same. I've lived in my house on Randolph Avenue for 46 years. Nobody has moved. And if anybody has a crisis, people come in and help. I broke my leg one time and I didn't tell people, but all of a sudden people were bringing food to my door. And there is such a strong sense of community in this town, thanks in part to the Herald, but also to the stability of this town, that it matters even more than all the stores that are operating. But all of that makes a community that survives with health.
We're in the 2020s, and I have to tell you, it reminds me of where I grew up in the 1960s, that sense of community, that sense of caring for one another, the sense of people, the stability of a town, and it's still here in Randolph. Marjorie Ryerson served in the House from 2013 to 2017, has been a photojournalist, author, professor. Marjorie, thanks so much for being on the show this morning.
My pleasure, Rick. Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and then we're going to return to our live broadcast here in Randolph, and we will meet from the White River Valley Herald, Tim Calabro. This is Vermont Viewpoint on WDEV. This is Vermont Viewpoint on WDEV, and we're still here at Ken's Barbershop in Randolph. No one has approached me yet with a razor. Yes, well, there really isn't much to shave. Whenever I come back to Randolph, I'm reminded of the late Mim Herwig. She served as a local newspaper correspondent, a weather columnist, a respected historian who delivered many talks about the historical events, and she championed numerous related projects, including the establishment of historic districts, the erection of markers, the restoration of buildings, and I did have the opportunity to meet her several years back when I was recording a piece on Randolph and Route 66. Now, someone who's been recording the local history as it's unfolding for the White River Valley Herald is the paper's owner and editor, Tim Calabro. Tim, thanks for stopping in for a haircut and a chin wag.
Hey, Rick, what's going on?
How you doing?
You're in the flesh here. It's a strange sensation.
Yes, for 6 months doing the morning show, every Friday I would talk to Tim on the phone, get an update of what was happening in the White River Valley, but we've never met before this very moment. So nice to meet you. I do have this from our Craig Burnham. He texted me and said he's loving the Randolph show and was in Randolph for the first time this past Monday. Had an incredible lunch at Kaya's Kitchen, which is right next door.
Kuya's, yeah.
What's it called?
Kuya's.
Kuya's. Okay, that's where I'm headed afterwards. He can't recommend it highly enough. So thanks for that recommendation. I think you also recommended Kuya's to me.
Oh, the sandwiches are so good.
That's
Definitely
what I've
gotta
heard.
get them.
All right. So Tim, did you get all the papers delivered?
Successfully so far. No one's complained to me yet, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
All right. Today is delivery day,
Today
right?
is delivery day. A lot of it goes out through the U.S. mail, but we have to drop at the individual post offices. So
Is that how you do
that
it?
starts early in the morning.
Wow. Now, as owner and editor of the paper, what are the many hats or jobs that you have to attend to that people might not even realize?
I mean, in theory, I'm the janitor, so things don't get cleaned up very well. I run all of our tech support stuff. Got to cover select board meetings. help reporters when they have issues, do all their insurance paperwork, a little bit of everything.
When did you first become part of the Herald family?
All right, so I took a photography class when I was a senior in high school in South Royalton, and through that I got connected to the Herald because the Herald had a internship program, and they would have high school students shoot the sporting events at their own schools. And so I started doing that, and I sort of never escaped from that. I was a photographer until buying the place in 2015.
Wow, that's an incredible rise. And what did it mean to you to be the 5th publisher of the paper, since it was founded in 1874, and to have Dickie Drysdale's blessing to carry on the paper that he loves so much?
Yeah, that was definitely meaningful. It's a awesome responsibility in the true meaning of the word awesome. Like there's a lot there. I mean, I stay up late nights worrying, like, am I going to be the one who messes this up? It's been so solid for so long, and
Right.
It's such a hard time for newspapers that there's definitely a lot of responsibility there. But Dickie was a tremendous mentor. And there's a lot of proud history at the Herald, so
Yeah.
it's awesome.
There sure is. It's been almost a year since his passing. Do you have a memory of Dickie that you care to share?
To me, it always comes down to the funny stuff that he would do. I mean, he had a tremendous sense of humor. He used to come rushing down the stairs and pretend that he was stumbling and falling down the stairs so that he could get a rise out of the people in the front office. Another thing I always like to remember is that we still have that strong relationship with our high schools and get a lot of students in to work with us. And during one of those meetings when Dickie was still around, I had just taken over, and he was coming to the meeting to give his wisdom. And he went around the table and asked why newspapers matter. And at the end, he shared his perspective on that, and that was simply because bad things happen in a community and people deserve to know about them, and good things happen in a community and people deserve to celebrate them. And it's just as simple as that.
Boy, you mentioned interns. One of the former interns at the Herald actually wrote the story of when you purchased, was Katie Jickling, went on to VT Digger and 7 Days, a fabulous journalist
Yep.
who came from the Herald.
And I was just emailing with her yesterday, I guess. She is right now in Belgium doing graduate studies in comparative religion, and is hopefully on the way to India for a big program studying how women interact in Christian sects there.
That is really interesting, and it's great to see Katie expanding, but she was really fabulous. Now, the paper was called the Herald of Randolph. It's now the White River Valley Herald. So, first of all, why the change in name, and how has that been received?
So it's had a bunch of names over the years. It started as the Herald and News, if we start counting our history when we do, because there's some predecessors that might or might not count. It became the Herald of Randolph under Dickie. It was the White River Valley Herald prior to that, when Dickie's father bought it. And Dickie wanted to kind of centralize that and emphasize that we're the paper of Randolph, particularly because at the time there was a lot of confusion over White River Junction and the White River Valley. And so advertisers couldn't wrap their heads around that. So for me, it was, I didn't come from Randolph. I came from a couple towns over in Royalton. And we're the paper for all these 16 towns that we cover. And I really wanted to make sure that people just didn't think, oh, forget about them. They're just in Randolph.
Yeah, no, excellent point. And you still have that wonderful building?
Yep.
All right. So please, it is one more thing to love about Randolph. Please tell people about the world headquarters of the White River Valley Herald.
Yeah, so I like to tell people this is the Herald's new building. It was built in 1899 for the paper. So for the almost 20 years before that, we had a little front window shop on Main Street, and then I think it was must have been L.B. Johnson who built, either L.P. Thayer or L.B. Johnson. It's right around the transition there, that built this just nice boxy 2-story building on Pleasant Street right behind Main Street. It looks it looks exactly like you would imagine an old newspaper office looks. Wood floors, creaky everywhere, lots of mementos on the walls. It's great.
It's funny you mentioned it's the new building. I was in Scotland in Dumfries, which is where Robert Burns hung out, and there's a couple pubs next to each other, and one was built in like 1590, and then the new pub was built in 1610.
And they call it the new pub?
Yeah, the new pub is just next door 20 years later, what is it that you enjoy about being the editor of a local newspaper?
There's a lot to enjoy. It's I get to meet great people just going out and covering the community. I get to work with some tremendous staff members. It's just a wonderful section of Vermont to be in. This central Vermont area, the White River Valley. In fact, I would say everything is enjoyable about running the Herald, except for when it comes down to like insurance paperwork.
Yeah, okay, that's understandable. And will small local papers survive?
I mean, that's anybody's guess, but if we have anything to say about it, that definitely.
Mm-hmm. When you're not attending to the many responsibilities of the paper, what is it that you like to do?
What do I like to do?
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Have you had time in the last
in the
7
few
years?
times that I do have spare time, I have a couple things. I'm incredibly nerdy, and I like computers a lot, and I do crazy Linux administration, home lab stuff. But I also like to build little pieces of furniture in a little wood shop in my basement.
Oh, no kidding.
So
Tell us about some of the pieces you've built.
Just like coffee tables and cabinets and stuff like that. I'm in the process of building a new media cabinet for my living room right now.
When you say build, you're not like me, and I build IKEA furniture.
No, I get the lumber and then mill it up and then put it all together.
Yeah, I hate guys like you. All right, so
Relaxing.
I'm sure it is. So you do woodwork. That is really pretty cool.
Less than I'd like to, but
Yeah.
it is fun when I can get to it.
Oh, well, good for you. What will we find in this week's Herald, White River Valley Herald, that you've been out delivering?
It's another great one. We've got on the front of the B section, a photo spread about the Amber Cup hockey tournament in Chelsea. We've got a front page story about this lawsuit that's going on in Stratford with a former road crew member. There's a great sort of personal profile of the Catholic priest who covers the area, who just got back from a military deployment. And he has some good stories about helping soldiers through difficult times in the transition out of Afghanistan. And the Bethel Royalton transfer station is always a hotbed of activity, and there's some stuff getting mixed up there, so that's there too.
It's funny, in all the places that I've ever lived, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk so much about transfer stations as here in Vermont. People really do get into the seriousness.
And most of us still call them the dump, even though
Yeah,
they're
the
not
dump. Well, we've got the dump show.
Exactly.
Music to go to the dump by. I will admit that I do turn to the White River Valley Herald when I'm looking for guests, for interesting guests or stories, because you do those kind of pieces that, and right in our listening area that we love, that I can find some great stories and put on the air.
And we've always done that sort of thing. We recently formalized it as a series called Our Neighbors, and I like to describe it as just an excuse to talk to whatever cool person we can find.
Yeah, and there's no shame in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I'm in radio. I get to talk to whomever I want, right?
Yep.
And they're all cool people, so I can call up and I have an excuse to do so, which I've done with Tim Calabro. Tim is the owner, editor of the White River Valley Herald, and you can hear Tim every Friday morning at about 8:40 on the morning news service of WDEV. Of course, you can check out the paper at ourherald.com. Tim, great meeting you. Thanks for being on the show, and of course for delivering the papers this morning.
It's a pleasure.
All right. We're going to take a break for CBS News. We'll get an update. Then we'll be back to hear from the amazing Jessamine West. And coming up today at 11 on WDEV, stay tuned for Common Sense Radio with Bill Sayre. This is Vermont Viewpoint on WDEV. Welcome back to Vermont Viewpoint, and welcome back to Ken's Barbershop in Randolph, where we've been broadcasting live this morning. This is stop number 3 on the tour. We've been to Harry's Hardware in Cabot and the Village Grocery in Waitsfield, and March 3rd, we're heading to the Elmore General Store. Now joining me at Ken's is someone who knows this place fairly well. We have the rock and roll librarian, Jessamine West, whose official title is Library Assistant at Kimball Public Library.
That's what the website says.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, well, that's where I stole it from. And Jessamine, welcome to Vermont Viewpoint.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, good to see you. Listeners, if you have anything to add to, for our trip here to Randolph, you can call us 802-244-1777, 877-291-8255. Hey, where do you get your hair done?
Where do I get my hair done? Well, I've got still my COVID hair, so
Yeah.
I haven't gotten a haircut in, probably 2 years. But when I get my hair cut, if they'll do it, I get it cut here.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So you're back. Maybe they have a chair open for you later if you're looking for that.
Not ready.
All right. Let's talk libraries. Why did you want to work in the library?
While I work in the library in Randolph or in libraries in general?
In general, yeah. And then you can tell us the Randolph story.
The libraries in general is, they are sort of what makes democracy go, I feel, in America, right? Everybody is welcome. Everybody has the right to read what they want. There are people who can help you figure out whatever you want to figure out. And I kind of appreciate they take the public's money and use it for the public's good, for all the public. And I'm just a real fan of knowing things, for lack of a better word. And I also am a real technology nut. And so being able to help people learn to use technology or solve their technology problems really appeals to me. I grew up in a town about the size of Randolph in Massachusetts. And so being in this sized community, helping people solve their problems or their information needs, really where I want to be.
And part B of the question is the one you posed yourself. Why the Randolph Library? Why the Kimball?
Well, when my mother came to visit me once, maybe about 10 years ago, we walked around the main street and went out and got coffee and got food. And she's like, how did you find our town where we grew up in 1971? Because I grew up in a small town outside of Boston, Boxborough, small, rural, almost farming community. And then the highway went through, and now it's kind of a Tony suburb. It's different, and things change, and that's fine. Randolph is in a slightly different place. There's still people who farm here for a job. It's got a nice walkable downtown, which is delightful, a bunch of villages with really strong local culture, and a bunch of people who are really invested in the community, who do civics. Civics is still really important. So I grew up going to town meeting and working at the Bloodmobile, or getting dragged to the Bloodmobile as a little kid when my mother was working the Bloodmobile. And, my sister's still on the Historical Society of that town because she still lives there. And, I'm doing very similar things up here. And Kimball Library is amazing. For a community this size, they've got full-time librarians who get health insurance. I mean, I'm a sub because I do other things. The building is beautiful. It is well maintained. It is lovingly maintained. They just got a renovation so the downstairs bathroom is even more accessible. I mean, it's little stuff like this. But, it's the jewel of the community, and it just makes me stoked to be a part of it. And I'm the computer lady, so I have a unique set of skills that is really valuable to this community, and it's kind of cool to be able to slot in like that.
Yeah, I love that. So how many libraries does Vermont have?
I think now 185. They have a couple that kind of waver back and forth, like maybe they're only open in the summer, or Pittsfield, I think, just got a paid librarian, which moves them from, volunteer library to whatever. So 185, I think.
Now, I know the libraries in the state are something you're very interested in, so I'm going to ask you some questions about that. And how are these libraries supported around the state?
Well, it varies, and it's really complex, but essentially each library is supported by its local community. So in other states, sometimes there's state funding that goes to counties or consortia, and then that goes to the libraries. The state pays some of the money. In Vermont, most of the libraries are supported entirely, or at least in part, by their local communities. Now, we have a state library that also gives a lot of support to local communities. They help run summer reading programs. They give a lot of continuing education. They do a whole bunch of stuff, but they don't directly get like a huge pot of money that goes to the town. So when Randolph is up for, like in Randolph, for instance, we're in the town budget. Rochester, for instance, is pulled out of the town budget and has to individually get their budget approved at town meeting. And you can kind of see how a town feels about their library, just in a general sense, by obviously money's real, right? So, but figuring out how that's going to work. Woodstock has, some money from, grants and whatever that also help pay, or endowments. It varies, but generally local control, local money decisions.
Now, I just had Tim Calabro, the Herald, on, and local newspapers, one institution that's had to reinvent itself, with the rise of the internet. What about libraries? What have libraries had to do to remain that important part of local communities, that part that people will say at budget time, this is important. We will indeed help finance it.
Well, I think the really big deal is the library is for everybody, but that's easy to say, but how do you make it real for everybody, right? And sometimes that's basic, right? Accessibility. Can people get into the building? When they're in the building, can they use the bathroom? Can they use a bathroom that matches their gender? Is somebody going to give them a hard time about that? That kind of thing. But then there's also, maybe you don't want to go into the library. Maybe that's not on your route. Maybe you live in East Randolph, which is over the mountain. Is there a way that the library can be serving you? And so, digital content has really changed a lot of that, especially in COVID. So, e-books, or maybe your library has Canopy and you can watch movies for free from home if you have the internet for it. Using technology, help with technology, which is kind of where I come in with the library. Outreach programs that interact with other community organizations. The library has a building that's cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And regardless of whether you want to go read a mystery novel or maybe just sit somewhere where somebody knows your name, all of those aspects, kids and young adults especially. You get a kid interested in the library, even as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, and you've got someone who knows the library's there for them as they age. And, more recently, the intellectual freedom aspect is huge, right? Especially after this last administration, being able to get accurate information about the challenges that are facing you, your community, people like you, is really important. And the library makes sure you can get the information you want without being judgy about it or without telling you should be reading something else.
It's been 2 years of COVID, and we've gone through a lot of different rules and regulations as we've come to grips with this. But how have you been able to adapt there at Kimball? What kind of things do you do to make sure people feel safe and can still access their library?
Well, the library right now is one of about 10 or 12 libraries that's still closed to the public. And it doesn't mean they're closed. I mean, the librarians are there working. They're doing a ton of curbside. They're doing phone reference. They're doing, Zoom book groups and all that kind of stuff. A lot of what I do is technology oriented. So people would come and we had drop-in time, right? Bring your laptop. Let's talk about what your problems are. And we'd be in the history room with that big old wooden table that you're imagining as I'm saying that. And so I had to really pivot to stuff I could do from home, stuff I could do over the phone. I do a lot of Zoom drop-in now where, I'll Zoom with somebody from my living room, and sometimes all we're doing, not as much now, but a year and a half ago, we would just be practicing Zoom. Okay, let's do mute, let's do unmute. Let's turn your camera off, let's turn your camera on. And it's so funny because I'm probably on Zoom hours every day, talking to my boyfriend, doing stuff on the internet.
I have an older brother who I might send your way for that tutorial.
My Facebook profile says I can teach your grandma how to use a computer, and I am not lying. Give him my email address. I do a lot of help over email. I do a couple let's go visit and figure out what's going on, because in this last year, if your technology wasn't working, you were really cut off from the outside world in a way not seen before.
Yeah.
And it was challenging to figure out who could help you and who was safe and what was going on. And when the library is open, we've got sort of plexi dividers and people are wearing masks, and you try very hard to get other people in the library to wear masks, but it's a creaky old building. The ventilation is terrible. And not for lack of trying, it's an old building. And so figuring out how to do that safely is what the library is working on right now.
Now, I also understand you're trekking around the state as a member of the 251 Club.
Board member of the
A
251
board
Club.
member. Oh, that's right. You are a board member. So where are you at? What's your number right now?
I've been to all the towns once, and I started in like 98 when I moved here. And then I decided, you get to the last town, and you're like, hooray, I read about you in the newsletter. But you're like, what do I do for an encore? And I decided I would, because 251 Club, right? You can do it however you want. Vermont's got 251 towns. Go see them. And so I decided I would go back and take pictures. And I'm assembling kind of a photo album of all the towns that I've been to. And I think I'm about 60 some odd % of the way through the photography level. And back to our libraries thing, I decided my own personal dippy quest was going to be setting foot in every library in Vermont, which is challenging as heck because sometimes they're open 14 hours a week, right? And I'm often free on the weekends, and they're often, almost every library is closed on Sunday because it's New England. And so that's been tricky, but man, it's so gratifying. I used to be really shy around people, strangers. I'd walk into a library and be like, I don't want to bother the person. And I've gotten a lot better at being like, hey, tell me a little bit about this library. Tell me about this community. Tell me what's good here, kind of the way you do for where's lunch?
Yeah.
Well,
I love that you're going back and seeing towns like that, photographing them. I will tell you that Randolph was one like that. I had been here several times, checked it off my 251 list, and then came back one day with a camera and walked around, and that's when I found some beautiful old barns and churches and that coal and ice company that I love so much.
R.I.P. coal and ice silos, yeah.
Love it. All right. Jessamine West is a library assistant. She's a rock star at Kimball Library, and their website is kimballlibrary.org. And I love that address because it's got 3 consecutive L's.
L's right in the middle of it. It is so hard to type. I'm not complaining, but it is a trick. We usually put the third L capital so people can see it.
It's beautiful.
And kimballlibrary.com is Kimball Library in a completely different state, so make sure you type it correctly.
All right, .org. We're going to take one more break, then we're going to check back in with our host here at Ken's Barbershop in Randolph, Tom Jacobs. This is Vermont Viewpoint on WDEV. We are still safely situated in the roomy Ken's Barbershop in downtown Randolph, and we're close to the very scary catamount in the window. I'm going to ask Tom Jacobs about that in a minute. We've met some wonderful Randolphians this morning, and now it's time to check back in with our host to see how much actual trouble we've caused here in the shop over the past couple hours.
You guys are so out of here.
Well, just give us 8.5 more minutes,
Okay.
and we'll pack up. What is it an actual catamount? What do we have
That is
there?
a mountain lion. It's
lion.
not from Vermont, and that's the only difference. The name would be it's from Vermont.
Yeah.
Stuart Kinney, a Braintree resident, shot that out in Montana. And it's a 150-pound average-sized male mountain lion. There had been so many sightings in Braintree that he brought it in here to put in the window and just let me have it. If anybody sees anything like that, it's a mountain lion.
Yeah.
If it's anything else, it's not a mountain lion.
That's right. Do you have a name for this one, or
No.
no? Okay.
I put a Rudolph hat on it once, and Stuart wasn't really happy about that. So we won't
All right, we'll back off on that. I mean, you see this every day in the shop and in the town, but I mean, did you see or hear anything this morning? I know you were cutting hair while we've been on the air, but that kind of give you further insight into what's special about this place, about Randolph. Or about the barbershop?
Well, all the above,
Yeah.
To me, the barbershop's always been special because my dad, I grew up in and around the barbershop.
Yeah.
So that'll always be dear to my heart. But the town itself has always been home. Even though I started my first few years in South Royalton, my grandparents lived in Randolph. We always came to Randolph, and when we had an opportunity to move to Randolph, even though my dad still had a shop in South Royalton, we moved to Randolph. I played sports here. I fell in love here. A lot of friends from here. Place is just full of good people.
Yeah, I've always felt the warmth every time I've driven into this town. I was going to ask you if parents still bring their kids in for the first haircut,
Absolutely.
make a big deal about it, but we kind of had that this morning.
Yeah.
We had two young boys who were brought in. I think they lost their grandfather.
Right.
And they have to, get cleaned up, and came in for haircuts. Mom took pictures. It was a special moment
It
to
was,
see,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and we for our first haircuts, we save the hair and we give them a
yeah,
certificate, and it's free because once you give them a free haircut, they're a customer for life.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, do you see, kids from age 2 or 3 on up till about the time they
Absolutely,
head off
yeah.
to college, and maybe even come back?
One of my customers today, a young man from over in Rochester Way, I was cutting his hair when he was in grade school, and now he has children that are having kids.
Yeah.
And I'm not that old.
No, you're not. You look good for
For
38.
Yeah. I love you.
My first barber was Ishi. Let him cut my hair for years. My sister once said, I can cut your hair. And she cut it, and it looked pretty good. She cut it a second time, and it looked like someone took a toupee and set it on sideways. And then I had to go back to Ishi.
And get it fixed.
Do you have situations like that?
Oh, yeah.
The at-home
Oh, yeah,
attempt?
all the time, and especially with COVID.
Oh, yeah,
When
right.
we had to close for 10 weeks. When we reopened, our first haircuts was a gentleman with his 2 young boys, and they all came in with hats on because mom had tried to do the hair. One of the little boys, actually, while his brother was getting butchered, he decided he could do a better job himself, so he went in the bathroom and he butchered his own head.
Yeah. Quick, open up a chair. We've got an emergency.
An emergency.
A downtown needs a certain mix of businesses to make it vital.
Absolutely.
That place that people will drive to and make a purchase. Does Randolph have that? We heard from Marjorie Ryerson, who said, she thought so. But what do you think?
I
You're
think we
here every
need.
day.
I think we need more. When we lost Belmain's,
Yeah.
Ben Franklin, Belmain's, whatever you want
Yep,
to call it,
yep.
by many names, that was a major hit to this community.
Yeah.
A lot of the folks used to come here for their arts and crafts, more so than they would go to Barry or West Lebanon. So
Sure.
people from outside of this Randolph area were coming here to go to Belmain's, which then they would hit the other stores, a barbershop or a pizza shop or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, when I stopped in that time to say, I'm going to photograph Randolph's, Belmain's was open, and I thought, oh my God, this is a gem.
Yeah.
This is such a wonderful place to have, and I can see where, something like that definitely is missing.
It was, the building's just recently been purchased by the Grays, and I know they have big plans for it. I don't know exactly what they are.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that they help.
You got Fars Hill possibly coming back
Fires
as well.
Hill is a great thing. Great
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. And I get special credit for it this year because it's on my anniversary.
Oh, well. you saw the date and you think, that date, that reminds me. What's
Yeah.
that date? I once dated a woman who had the same birthday as me, and I thought I'd marry her on that same day.
Perfect.
And then I would never
Forget anything.
It didn't work out, and I'm still single, so there you go.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, I know. Do you ever tire of the stories that you hear from patrons?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. Not even the same stories.
Which you'll hear repeat.
Oh yeah. But I no. And sometimes they change a little bit. This is a barbershop. We never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
There's no fake news in here, is there?
Never.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. What's the most important thing you think you learn, though, from listening to your customers day in, day out?
Well, really, listening to them,
Yeah.
I think is more important than any little bit of, stupid wisdom I could give somebody.
Yeah.
Most people have something to say and need to be heard.
Yeah. And when can you tell when you have somebody in the chair who just doesn't want to talk?
Oh, well, we plug a few questions and you get one-word answers, and then you just, focus on the haircut.
Yeah. Yeah, they're in and out pretty quickly, aren't they?
That's right, yeah.
All right. Tom Jacobs is the owner of Ken's Barbershop in Randolph. Tom, I want to thank you for the hospitable welcome this morning. It was great being
Glad
here.
to have you here.
All right. And it has been great getting to know the wonderful character of the people and of Randolph this morning. That is our show for today. Vermont Viewpoint is directed by Danny McGivrigan. And listeners, feel free to suggest guests or topics or another place we can stop off at on our tour around the state. You can send it to vtviewpoint@radiovermont.com. You can listen to past episodes of Vermont Viewpoint by downloading our podcast at wdevradio.com, including today's stop here at Ken's. The WDEV podcast is sponsored by the Warren Store, funky, friendly, and almost world famous. And Common Sense Radio is up next with Bill Sayre. I'm Rick Singari. I'll meet you back here tomorrow. I'll speak with Bob Ney. We're going to discuss cheese from Mount Mansfield Creamery, the Penguin Plunge, and Vermont 211. Take care.